Hi, do you know the story of Adam and Eve, or in Islam, Adam and Hawwa? So, this is a story that originates from the Talmud and the Torah of the Jews. And in this story, God takes and makes the first human out of dirt and clay and whatnot. And that's Adam. And he puts Adam in the Garden of Eden. He at some point he makes Eve. Now, depending on the version, he made Eve from Adam, from his rib in some stories, or he made her from the same material as Adam, but not from Adam. Now, Christians especially, they love to say, oh, well, women came from men, so women should be subservient to men. And they use this idea of a man having one less rib than the woman as, some kind of a bizarre explanation. But in reality, if you look at human anatomy, this is generally not the case. Women don't have one more rib than men. Men don't have one more rib than women. There's some variance across the whole species, not to mention the other human species. But it's not factual. It's just some myth that somebody decided was clever and useful. So God said, and you have to understand, the Garden of Eden was paradise. It was perfect. Adam and Eve were in a state of innocence, of purity, of naivety. They had no concept of sin, but they had free will. God said you can live here as long as you want in the Garden of Eden, but there's only one rule. You can have anything you want here except for the fruit of that tree there. And so Adam and Eve were like, deal. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, God. You're a buddy. They've given him the ultimate pad, the ultimate home. And all they got to do is, avoid breaking one stinking rule. Well, time goes by, and they live there together blissfully without any sex, because if you're innocent, you don't know what sex is. There's no such thing as an oopsie. It's just all very innocent. Interesting, right? And one day, and the stories vary here. Either Adam was there or he wasn't. Or Adam was there and heard the conversation but chose not to participate. Or Adam was there and was compelled not to participate. Or Adam was there and could see them together but couldn't hear the conversation. Or Adam was totally unaware that there was a conversation occurring between Eve, or Hawwa, and Satan, or the serpent. Now, at that point in time, based on some of the stories, the serpent had arms and legs. So Satan is working his tricks and convinces Eve, or Hawwa, to try the fruit. And he uses some really good arguments. It's manipulation, but it's good arguments. And so Eve grabs a fruit and she eats it, and she says, wow, this is good. She gives one to Adam. Now, depending on the version, she either has to convince Adam or he willingly takes it with or without having heard the conversation. There's no clarification on that point. Now, at some point or other, God, who's all-knowing and all omnipresent, omniscient, omnipresent, God is everywhere and God knows everything. God comes looking for Adam and Eve, and they hide because they are ashamed, because now they are no longer pure and innocent. They understand sin. They have covered their loins, their genitals, with leaves because they're ashamed. And God knows all this, but still goes walking around the garden pretending not to know. And finally he locates them as if he didn't know exactly where they were in the first place, because it's like they've got GPS collars on them and they've got air tags on them, and God is like, beep, 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 beep. Oh, there they are. I knew it. But yeah, and so a conversation ensues in which Adam and Eve eventually confess to what had happened, and that they were ashamed, and that's why they were hiding from God. And God says, well, I gave you one rule. You blew it. Turns to Satan and says, for that I shall cut off your arms and legs. And so he becomes a true serpent. And then he takes Adam and Eve and he says, I cast you out of the Garden of Eden forever. as well as all of your offspring. Now remember, there are no other humans. So all of humanity has been cursed to never enjoy the Garden of Eden. All of humanity for all times. Which I think is pretty unfair, just because, there's a lot of reasons why it's not fair. But, when you go to church or synagogue or the mosque, they don't discuss why it's unfair. They just state it as, these are the facts, live with it. This is why our life sucks. So our lives suck because, the evangelicals have been co-opted by the Catholics, so they believe that stupid bishop from hundreds of years ago who decided that based on the Bible, time began 6,000 years ago or so. And there was nothing before that. Yeah, as if a bishop had enough knowledge to actually be able to calculate based purely on the Bible, which is just rubbish. But the evangelicals have been co-opted by Opus Dei, and that's a kind of a apocalyptic, maybe satanic branch of Catholicism. And there's an ongoing war between the Catholics and the Opus Dei group. But anyways, it sucks, right? And it sucks because Adam and Eve screwed up. But let's think about this for a moment. If Adam and Eve were the first humans, the only humans, as far as the Bible's concerned, as far as the Torah is concerned, as far as the Al-Quran is concerned, then how is it that there are so many of us now? Does that mean that Adam and Eve had made a bunch of children, and those children had sex with each other, and maybe with Adam and Eve as well? And then the grandchildren were born, and they had sex with each other and their parents and their grandparents as well? And on and on and on, and God just let them live in sin, committing incest, and protected them from the consequences by preventing genetic mutations that were dangerous, like you would see if you study the Habsburg family, the royal family of Austria, and of Europe in general, because they kept on interbreeding and not breeding with people outside of the royal families. And yeah, so, a lot of incestuous relationships there. So does that sound reasonable? And then there's the whole story of Cain and Abel, how Cain killed Abel and stuff. It kind of sounds like maybe there was some genetic mutation, because here we have a psychopath killing his brother. But that I have a problem, and I don't see one sin. I see several sins. And of those several sins, only one was committed by Adam and Eve. They broke that one rule. That's one sin. And it is referred to as the original sin. And in some sects of Christianity, I can't speak for Islam and Judaism, but in some sects of Christianity, they believe that we are all doomed to hell because of the original sin, unless we are saved. Which gives Christians a compelling reason to go about their duty as proselytizers, which is really optimally annoying to me, and is why Christianity is such a meme, because they're commanded to go out and get more people to join. It's a meme. It's like a virus. And they won't leave me alone. But I digress. So you're saying, well, if there were several sins, what are the other sins? And if Adam and Eve didn't do it, who did? Well, there's the obvious one, which is Satan. Satan tricked Eve. And since we don't really know the details of the story about Adam's involvement in the conversation, we don't know how guilty he was in his decision to eat the fruit too. Was it just the rule he broke, or did he know other things and becomes more culpable? So Satan committed a sin. Obviously not for Satan an original sin, because Satan's original sin was becoming prideful and then rising up with a bunch of other angels against God, saying, I'm not going to serve you anymore because you're putting humans above us. and they're flawed and we're wonderful and blah, blah, blah. Which, that's a whole nother story in itself about did angels have freedom of will or not? And do they have free after Satan did that? Lucifer, the morning star, after he did that, did actually the angels continue to have free will if they had it at that point? Because if they did not have free will, there's no way Lucifer and the other angels could have rebelled and been cast down to hell and become demons. It just is impossible. And if it is possible, and it did, and God is omniscient and omnipotent, then God knew it was going to happen, allowed it to happen. So a little bit perplexing. But getting back to the Garden of Eden sins, the other sins were all perpetuated and perpetrated by God. God knows everything that's going to happen. Past and present obviously are no mystery to God, and God also can see the future. So God knew that they would eat that fruit. And God didn't put safeguards into place to protect them from Satan. God did not prevent Satan from entering the garden. So God set Adam and Eve up to be cursed and all of us to be cursed. That does not sound like a just God. It does not sound like a fair God. It does not sound like a loving God. It does not sound like a forgiving God. So to me, the fact that God set it up that way and allowed it to happen that way was the original sin. The original sin. And then passing that curse on along to every generation after Adam and Eve was the second original sin that God committed against us. Now, I don't know about you. I was raised in a form of Christianity that's more about the love side of Jesus than the angry side of Jesus, and more about the unifying side of Jesus than the dividing side of Jesus, like you'll see in Luke. So it doesn't really work for me. The story doesn't work for me. It's clearly something is horribly wrong with God, or something is horribly wrong with the story. And since there are many parts of the Bible where we see these hypocrisies and these conflicts, there's a larger problem than the scope of this conversation that you and I are. Well, you're not conversing with me, I don't think. If you are, I can't hear you. Talk louder. But God caused everybody's misery by allowing Adam and Eve to taste the fruit, because they were not tempted until Satan came. And God knew that Satan could come, and God knew that once Satan tempted them enough, they would break the rule. And God did nothing to prevent it. Now, you could say, oh, well, that's, parents and children, right? You could argue that. But let me ask you this. If I say to you, okay, kids, we're going to go out, and we'll be back later, and you guys can just go ahead and have fun. Make yourself some food. You can do anything, but don't play with Papa's guns. Okay? They're in the bedroom. Stay out of our bedroom and don't touch the guns. A certain percentage of children will go get those guns and look at them. A certain percentage of those children will play with the guns. A certain percentage of the parents of those children will not have put a lock on those guns. A certain percentage of those parents will not have removed all the bullets and the magazines from those guns. And a certain percentage of those kids will point it at themselves or at each other and pull the trigger, and death or other horrible things happen. So we can say, yeah, it's kind of like like an analogy for stuff like that. Parents making bad mistakes and the children suffering for the mistakes of the parent. But we're still talking about the mistakes of the parents, God. But God doesn't make mistakes. Well, then the argument, of course, is we can't understand God's ways because God is so much wiser and smarter and blah, 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 which is just a cover-up for the fact that the Bible is trash. The Torah is trash, and the Al-Quran is trash. So why would the creators of these documents put that story in there? Why would they, so early in the book, why would it be there? Well, that's easy. Control. See, maybe back in the days of the Jews' early roots, which scholars aren't even sure about, let alone the Hindus, which is even more ancient. The people who decided at whatever point in time to write certain parts of the Torah did so with the goal of control. Now, how do you get control? Well, you use emotions. Guilt, fear, anger, hatred, anxiety, sadness, and even happiness and other, nice emotions can be used. Now, if you don't, these leaders, they understood, lacking all the technology we have, it doesn't mean they lacked brains, okay? They understood from history that when people are given too much knowledge, they fall away because they identify with and realize that the religions are false, that they are human constructs for control. Sometimes the original intention of a religion is good, but it's then corrupted over time by other humans after the founder is gone. And sometimes the founder was corrupt, or the founders were. So they knew from however long, lots of experience, that they had to control these people by using emotional manipulation and emotional abuse. And what better way to set the stage of preventing people from wanting to learn new things so that they would learn enough to be able to think critically and question the inanities of their religion than by saying, look, this is why we're suffering, because of Adam and Eve. They went and sought knowledge, and we were cast out of the Garden of Eden. Good thing they got damned, but why do we have to be damned? Because it instills a fear in people for learning. It instills in them a desire to have blind faith, to not question, and to try to avoid associating too much with people of other religions. Because when you start mixing, then questions and answers happen, notes are compared, and people sometimes discover that, ooh, wow, now that I'm looking at it from the perspective of this person, that doesn't really make any sense. So you control them so that they don't learn and they don't ask questions. And that is the original sin of the Bible and the Torah and the Quran. Well, maybe not the original sin. There are others. There are plenty of other things about those books that are egregiously, violently sometimes sinful and evil. I cannot say for certain if the founders of Judaism were good people or bad people, or good intentions or bad intentions, and the same with Jesus and the same with Muhammad. I can, however, with a fair degree of certainty say that the disciples of Jesus after his death were manipulative con artists, and some of them were known to be criminals. When you lose your source of bread and honey, sometimes you just go back to your old ways. It's not like it's unusual. I mean, we're humans. So, those are the original sins of Adam and Eve caused by God, according to those ancient false documents. Thanks for watching.